Hello, good morning, everybody. We are starting this 45 minutes after the time we thought we did. We had our own emergency preparedness issues today, but more in the tech region. This is Amy Register with the Home Health Mentor, my mom, Teresa Register. And today we're going to talk a little bit about emergency prep. If you haven't got a chance to meet my mom, haven't hung out with us on this podcast yet, I just want to let you know that this lady is chock full of experience in home health, 30 plus years in a variety of different areas, from nursing and director of nursing, all the way up to being on boards and in charge of home health agencies. So she's seen it from a lot of different aspects. She's also been a surveyor for one of the accrediting bodies. And so she's got the inside scoop. And today, Mama, you're going to kick us off with a personal story, I believe, of when you were a surveyor and emergency preparedness came into play. How are you doing this morning, Mom?
I'm doing better now. um, on my very last day as a surveyor, I had been assigned to go to Houston to do a survey of an agency there. And they had a lot of flooding, but I thought I could get to the home health agency just fine. So I set out in the morning to go and do my survey. When I got to the building, there were only maintenance people there. The parking lot was pretty much empty. I went in, I called the number that was next to the agency's door and said, I am here to do a survey. And the man on the other end said, what? Are you crazy? Do you not know we're being flooded? and so I took that as evidence that the agency would be closed that day and headed back to my hotel room. And on the way, I got off on a very long off ramp and didn't realize that at the bottom of the ramp, there was a lot of water and there was a truck in front of me. And as I thought I could gun it and get through the water, the truck in front of me stalled out, causing water to come over the hood of my car and made my car stall out. And so I'm sitting there in the middle of a flood and the water is rising. So I quickly turned my wheel on the car, so in case it started to float away, it would float to the side of the road, and put my windows down and thought, is someone going to rescue me? Well, to make a long story short, I did not get rescued. I had to climb out the window of my car because the water had climbed up to the edge of my window. I had just gotten some new shoes. I took them off so they wouldn't get wet, rolled up my pant legs, and I waded out of the water that was by then chest high. And holding my computer bag and my shoes above my head, I made my way to the side of the road and was in a bit of shock. And as I turned around, I saw my car go floating away. And so I've had my own experience with flooding and my own little emergency preparedness plan that I had to come up with really fast.
For her
Because
family, we were wondering what was going on and, worried about that she was okay. But when she told us the story, we were like, yep, save the laptop, save the shoes. Girl's got to have her shoes. And the good news is that was a rental car with insurance.
it was a rental car with insurance, and I ended up just hanging out at a different hotel lobby for about 6 hours trying to figure out how to get back to my hotel, and ended up having to wade about another mile to get to higher ground where the hotel van would come and pick me up so I could get back to my room. So I was, needless to say, really cold, wet, and discouraged because,
What a way to go out of
of a
the
job.
surveyor life. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I can
okay,
laugh
well,
about it now.
let's get this back onto what folks are tuned in today. I know you guys did tune in to hear action and adventure stories. I'm sure of it. And you've probably got some of your own. We'd love to hear them, especially if they're home health related. That seems like a fun book. But um, this it's one thing when it's like just you, but for the home healthcare agency, this is not just them trying to get them and their people out. This now spills over into, what are we going to do for our patients? Is there any
Right,
way that we can continue caring for them? I mean, is this, like people have to have this emergency preparedness plan, and it's not just about looking good on paper. People's lives are at risk. And so, um, Mom, I have looked over your podcast notes, and I already told you this and we laughed about it. Everyone at home, this is dry stuff unless you put real lives behind it. So for the first part, Mom, you're going to give us a little bit of history and kind of like the how to's, but stick around because when it gets to some of the details and practical stuff on training, I know this is going to be super helpful, especially for people who are in flood areas, fire areas, tornado areas. Um, Something can always happen, earthquake areas. So take us through some of this
detail.
detail. Yeah.
So, so yeah, I told the story not just because it was, kind of a harrowing experience, but to point out that in some areas of the country, there are known hazards, and Houston is one of those areas that gets flooded regularly. So those agencies are going to have to really have a good emergency preparedness plan to deal with
Mm.
flooding, right?
Yeah.
If you live in California, in an area that has fires, then obviously that's going to be a major issue for you. And then, there's tornadoes in Oklahoma and Arkansas, and different places obviously have different problems. In the past, there wasn't really a requirement for home health agencies to have a written plan about how to deal with that. And Medicare decided, I guess, someone at Medicare decided that not only home health, but all health facilities would need to have some kind of an emergency preparedness plan. So,
Yeah. Imagine
so
that.
yeah, imagine that. So Appendix Z came into be. And Appendix Z is part of the state operations manual that provides interpretive guidelines for surveyors who are looking at the emergency preparedness plans that home health agencies, well, all kinds of providers, but in our case, we're looking at home health.
Mhm.
They're looking at agencies to make sure that they are in compliance with the regulations surrounding emergency preparedness. This is a big, big topic. We're not going to be able to get through a lot of detail in a short amount of time, but but what I'd like to do is just direct people to my Facebook page where I've posted some information that gives more detail about what the requirements are, what the regulations are, and how to access that Appendix Z so that people can find it and read it for themselves if they're not familiar with it.
Okay, just for those who are, going to be watching or listening to this on YouTube later, the Facebook page is just like the YouTube. It's the Home Health Mentor. So facebook.com/the Home Health Mentor. And second thing I wanted to point out is that all home health things sound like Mission Impossible to me. It's like, yes, I'm handing you Appendix Z. All right, carry on, Mama.
Okay, so when they go to Appendix Z, they're going to look for a CFR, which is how different sections of the federal regulations are defined. And they're going to look for 484.102 for home health specific guidelines. So let me go into a little bit of background. In the fall of 2017, the requirement was in place for home health agencies to have an emergency preparedness plan. Then it went through some changes. Some, people complained, I'm sure, about some of the regulations, which gave CMS some feedback. And so there have been a few changes since it was initially put out as, the final rule. So one thing that people need to understand about this whole emergency preparedness issue is if you are trying to do your own audit, your own mock survey, as we've been, talking about, you need to understand that this still is one of the most cited problem areas that surveyors will deal with. Not only is it the second most cited condition level deficiency, but 6 of the 10 top citations in 2018, the year after this went into effect, 6 of the 10 were related to emergency preparedness. So even though there have been some changes and people have a little more experience, it still is a confusing area for a lot of people. And it's an area that people have a hard time complying with, especially if it's a small agency and they don't have anyone that is really designated as an emergency preparedness contact person. So, so it is a very detailed area of the conditions of participation. So it requires someone in every agency to become really well-versed and knowledgeable about what's included in the standards. So there are 4 requirements that are laid out in the final rule that addresses emergency preparedness. The first one, obviously, is to develop an emergency preparedness plan. And this is not something that's going to take like a page or even 2. It's, I think the one that I did for our agency is probably about 20 pages. Again, it's going to be very detailed and it's going to require a risk analysis. And that doesn't mean you just off the top of your head think, okay, we've got, we live in this area, so we might have fires or we might have a tornado. It's expected that you'll do a very detailed risk analysis. And then you have to contact people, local shelters, emergency response kinds of things, makeshift morgues. What will you do if your power goes out? It's very detailed. So it's not something that you can just throw together. And I just say that because administrators really have to understand that it's going to take somebody some time to make a plan that's unique to your agency and your area. There are a lot of them that you can download from the internet free of charge, but then you still have to make it unique to your facility and make sure that it fits with the kinds of hazards that you're likely to see.
I think that's really, I think the makeshift morgue thing got my attention because this is meta sad and pretty serious, but I like that you're saying that you can get some freebies and modify them and Just knowing what's likely, more likely, I guess, to happen in your area. That's a helpful thing to guide as you're putting this together.
Right. And, there are going to be things that are unique to your area, like if you have to meet your staff someplace because your facility is flooded or caught on fire or whatever, you have to have a place where you can all meet. And that's going to be unique to your town, to your specific area. You also are going to have to coordinate with some of your local response teams. And so that's going to be unique. You're going to have to designate shelters where people could be taken, or you could tell your patients, this is where you need to go if you need to evacuate, and we'll find you. So yeah, the first thing that's required by the final rule is that you put together a plan that is unique to your agency. And in that plan, they really want agencies to try to work in a community setting and be prepared to do a community type response.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, the second one is that they have to develop and implement policies and procedures based on your risk analysis and the emergency plan that you've put together. So your policies need to be looked at and addressed. And I will be talking about some things that you will want to update, which means you'll update your plan and you'll also have to update your policies and procedures if you haven't already. And I'll go into more detail in a little bit.
Yeah, just get through this. This is the part I was talking about. Like when you're just hearing it, you're like, okay, what does this mean?
Okay. The third thing is to make sure that you have an effective communication plan in case of an emergency. I won't go into detail on that. Just know that the communication system that you usually work with, your phone system, your cell phones, all that might go away. So you may need to use walkie-talkies.
Get your carrier pigeons ready now.
Fly.
All right. What's the fourth one?
Number 4 is to develop and maintain a training and testing program. And you will need to do initial training of staff as you hire people. And then you have to have ongoing training and testing. So the training initially was required to be annually. It doesn't have to be annually anymore, per se. The training has to be done every 2 years. Your overall plan has to be documented as reviewed every 2 years. But you do have to have a testing program that's annual. And this is the part that gets a little bit confusing to people, because you would, at least I would think, that if you have to have a test, if you have to do testing every year, seems like you would then go back to your plan and update it if necessary every year. But according to the way the regulations are written, the plan has to be updated at least every 2 years, but you have to test your plan every year. So
Yeah.
this is the part you're gonna have alternating requirements. You're going to do testing every year, but you're going to do a different kind of testing each year.
Mom, just to pause real quick for a question. These are for Medicare standards, and Janesh is asking also any state requirements.
These are CMS standards. So they apply to any Medicare provider of any kind. So it's for hospitals, for nursing homes, for home health. They each will have their unique requirements. So
Okay.
it will supersede any state requirements that apply to home health, but states may have some additional ones.
Okay. That seems pretty usual for this industry. Everyone has their
It
own
is.
special things to make your life difficult.
So the rule of thumb is that you always have to apply the most stringent standard, whether it's federal, state, accreditation, or agency policy and procedure. Whatever the most stringent is what
Mhm.
gets applied when a surveyor is coming to survey your agency.
Mhm. All right.
Um, so as far as training goes, I wanted to point out that there is a well-known weakness that surveyors will hone in on really fast anytime you're talking about staff training. It's required that contractors are involved in emergency preparedness training and that they know if there's an emergency, how they're supposed to respond. And I will tell you, as a surveyor, I always wanted to go out on home visits with any contract staff. And it was usually contractors who were providing therapy services. The therapists rarely could answer questions about training that they had received on emergency preparedness plans. They didn't know anything about what the agency plan was or how they were supposed to respond in an emergency. So it's really important for every agency to know that they need to make sure that their contractors are also trained in emergency preparedness. They will most likely get asked a question about it.
Mhm.
Okay, I wanted to try and make the testing a little bit easier to understand. So, the way the plan is tested will depend on whether you have any actual emergencies, and then, secondly, whether you do a standalone kind of test or if you participate in a community wide event. So, there are some options here. As
We
I
like
said,
options.
as I said, you will have some kind of testing each year. The home health agency can either participate in a full scale exercise that's a community wide kind of test. If you have multiple first responders in your area that sponsor some kind of an emergency preparedness drill, you can participate in that. If you do not have that available, you can do a standalone kind of test where you, as an agency, run through your own created emergency, but you actually have to, actually carry it out. You have to actually do it. And then on the opposite year, you can either do another full scale exercise if that's available, or you can do a mock disaster drill, a second kind of independent full scale drill, or a tabletop exercise or workshop that you have a facilitator, group discussion, you use a narrated, clinically relevant emergency scenario with a set of problems. It gets really involved. But you have the option on those alternate years, you can do, any one of those three, either a full scale exercise that's community based or your individual drill, a mock disaster drill, or a tabletop exercise or workshop kind of setting.
Does
So,
anybody like these? Does anyone look forward to these? I could see how they would be exciting and, like, you
well,
know how people
I never
sorry, go
looked
ahead.
forward to them. I
You
can't
know
speak for
how,
everyone.
people get really into dressing up and, reenacting different battles from US history. I feel
Yeah,
like it could almost get that kind of following if you played your cards right. Like, it could be everyone's favorite time of year. I think there's a lot of potential for that here.
the when they do a community-wide drill, I think that might be the case because they actually have people who, they put on fake wounds or, mark up their face or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I guess if you're into acting, it could be fun.
Or strategy table games.
Right.
Yeah, I think, that's something that if I were working in a home healthcare agency and my administrator was like, "Okay, we've got this thing again, but we will provide snacks and please feel free to dress up, be in character as a different home healthcare professional." I don't know, you could make it fun. I'd
I
look
guess,
forward to
yeah, I guess it could be fun.
it.
But I really don't know anyone who actually does look forward to it. Um,
Yeah.
the final caveat is that if you have an actual emergency, an actual disaster where you have to um, enact, your plan, then you don't have to do, your tabletop or your fake one. It counts. It counts as a real one, and you're free to wait another year before you have another drill. So it's again a little bit confusing. You have all these options, so it's important for you to get familiar with Appendix Z, and in the State Operations Manual, it's pages 55 through 76, and you want to make sure that you have some kind of a standard tool or a list that you can go one by one through these requirements, because again, these are common citations that agencies have to deal with, and it's better to take the time up front and make sure you're in compliance than to have to write a plan of correction after the fact. So, yeah. So I said I was going
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
address a couple things that are new issues that you have to be concerned about with your emergency preparedness plan. There have been obviously some emerging concerns that you will need to address in your emergency preparedness plan. Specifically, as we all know, we've been dealing with COVID.
Mhm.
So, any kind of emerging infectious diseases, those will probably continue in the future. I hate to, say it because nobody likes what we've been through,
Nope.
but but we may need to really get down to the nitty gritty on how to deal with various kinds of threats like influenza, Ebola, any kind of the coronaviruses.
Mhm.
So make sure that as you're reviewing your emergency preparedness plan, that you go into some good detail on how you would deal with emerging infectious diseases. Another
Oh,
area,
man. I
yeah.
just had this is ridiculous, but I just had an interesting thought. If you can't figure out, if you don't have the imagination for that, I think there are several popular movies on Netflix that could help you out. Just
Oh,
see what
good
they
God.
do and don't do it because they always seem to mess it up.
Uh, yeah, I haven't seen any of those, but I think those of us who have lived through the past 18 months will take this issue seriously.
Yeah.
Um, the other issue that has come up in the past few months is cyber attacks, and
Mhm.
those are probably going to, be plaguing us into the future.
Mhm.
So those kinds of attacks can interrupt communication. Our cell phones may not work. Our usual, landlines may not work.
Mhm.
Another problem that we could foresee is a fuel shortage. And for home health, that would be a major interruption. If you don't have gas to go see patients, how are you going to
Absolutely.
deal with that? There will be supply chain issues. We have had problems with not only the manufacturing of PPE, but the delivery of those items and the cost issues. So there's all kinds of potential threats to our being able to take care of patients. We have heard a lot about power grids being um, able to be attacked and
Mhm.
losing power in large areas. There have been whole cities or half of cities and many blocks in cities losing power. And if you're in a city, that could be one of your biggest threats. If you're in the country or people are more used to losing power because of storms, that kind of thing, it may not be as big of an issue. But if you
Mhm.
lost power for an extended period of time, then it's going to disrupt your ability to document on your patients and to be able to carry out your normal functions. So,
Wow. Yeah. If you were looking for peace today, I hope you found it somewhere else. Today's not for you.
yeah. So, these emerging issues obviously will have implications for how the agency is able to not only take care of their own business, but it's important that as the home health agency professionals, that we assist patients to think about some of these issues that could cause them to not be able to get services.
Right.
Every patient is supposed to have an emergency plan that is personal to them. They're supposed to
Mhm.
designate someplace where they can go if there's an emergency. So home health agencies are supposed to be helping our patients
That's
do
awesome.
their own planning.
Yeah.
So that's important. One of the things that our agency made a conscious decision about that I think is worth bringing up here is it's hard to take care of other people unless you know your family is safe. So we adopted a policy of family first. We don't expect our employees to show up to take care of other people's, loved ones until they know theirs are safe. So
Mhm.
as agencies are considering what kind of policies to put in place, that might
Mhm.
be one that they would like to talk about and make some decisions about and actually express.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that makes you wanna stay with an agency when you know that's where the heart is, so that's good for taking care of your employees' concerns and retaining them as well. It looks like we're wrapping up today, and so I wanted to let you guys know if you have not had your question answered and you have a specific question about this topic, we'd love to see it here in the next 30 seconds or so. Um,
Right.
but yeah, anything else? Any other closing ideas or words of warning or admonition?
Well, again, I just wanted to make sure that people don't think that this is something that they can write once and put on a shelf in a notebook and that it's going to be good to go. This is something that surveyors are going to want to see that you've updated, that you've reviewed, that you've practiced. They're going to test your staff. They're going to ask them questions about the emergency preparedness plan. It's important that the agency doesn't get lazy when it
Mhm,
comes to this topic. It's also important for agencies to make sure that you keep up the priority listings for your patients. if they're priority 1, 2, or 3, or ABC, however you designate your patients, just make sure that those are accurate. And then the other thing is to make sure your calling tree is accurate. So if you have to contact staff and notify them that you've put an emergency into place, that those employees can be reached. Not only do you want that so you can call them in, but you may need to check on them because they may be, they may be out seeing patients when something is headed their way, and you might need to notify them. So it's important just to, take this seriously. And if you're adding programs, if you've added infusion therapy, for example, make sure you include all of your programs in your emergency preparedness plan. I think those were the main things, is just make sure that if there are changes in your agency, that you've addressed those in your emergency plan, as well as the obvious things like floods and fires and tornadoes. Make sure that all of your different services are represented, all your contractors are educated, and that you keep all of your data, all of your information up to date in case you need to enact your plan.
Awesome. Good tips, real life stuff. Everybody get a small fleet of bicycles that can also be hooked to generators. Snack packs to go, all kinds of stuff going into those plans.
I thought maybe it might be good to have a couple motorcycles.
Yeah,
they don't use a lot of gas, and you can, put some things on saddlebags and go where you need to go.
I agree. That's kind of a neat idea. You could call one of your local motorcycle clubs and be like, hey, can you be on standby for part of our emergency preparedness plan? Be a good community outreach thing.
That is one of the things that some agencies have done. They've gotten in touch with some motorcycle clubs, and even in some of the northern states, they work with people who have snowmobiles to take them to make visits if the snow is too deep and they can't get out in their vehicles. They'll go by snowmobile.
That's cool. This is cool stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are going on to getting close to 40 minutes here, and we try to keep it around 30. So I don't see any other questions, but you guys know where to reach Teresa. On the Facebook page is the best way, and that is facebook.com/thehomehealthmentor. Thanks for joining us today. And what are we doing next week?
I really don't know. I've been considering a couple different topics, but I really feel like after this week, we need to do something kind of fun.
Horror stories from the field. That's what we're going to do. All right.
I might do an interview of someone that I talked to recently, and she did have a very bad survey, and she has some good stories. I might be able to get her. I might be able to get her to come on, and we can interview her.
Yeah, we've been doing hard news. Might be time for human interest. All right. Yeah, anybody who is watching this or listening to this next week, if you've got an idea, if you've got a story, someone who needs to get something off their chest, hey, maybe we'll have a good old-fashioned home health gossip session. You never know. We are learning as we go. Thanks for joining us. And send your home health related questions to Teresa at facebook.com/thehomehealthmentor. And you can also check out our website, which of course is thehomehealthmentor.com, where we are uploading new tools for you every week. Thanks for joining us. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.